Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon, or in some cases, good evening, I think. Welcome to our Innovation Circle podcast episode on Ukraine's GovTech Lab and Open Challenge Innovation. It's my great pleasure and honor to be the moderator. And before I introduce our two panelists and tell you a little bit about what we want to achieve today, I'd like to give the floor to Anders Johnson, the Chief of the Innovative Policies Development Section, to just say a few opening remarks. Anders, please.
Yes, thank you, Jacob. And I'm especially excited about this session because this has been the result of a discussion that we had with Iuliia, who was one of our most appreciated colleagues over the last couple of years on the CEDA project. And I would personally be delighted if I and my colleagues can take a little bit of credit for your success, and most of all, congratulations. It's also important because we have a long-standing relationship with Ukraine. We are doing a review at the moment. Of course, it has been difficult for several reasons, but we're very eager to keep and to expand and to build on this relationship. And I think this topic of GovTech actually comes at an appropriate moment, and that's what I wanted to say a few words about to frame the discussion. So, e-governance is very difficult, and I actually worked with some of the people that are now advising Ukraine on this about a decade ago. The issue is not as much technology, but as that before you can digitalize, before you can make something efficient, you first have to go through the way things are normally done, and sometimes completely rewrite them. And that often falls foul of habits. It falls foul of entrenched interest. There might be people working in that position. Very often, it doesn't work for that reason. And one of the examples that Ukraine is looking at is actually Estonia. And Estonia actually went through a period where there are many similar elements that could give an opportunity to Ukraine to really go for radical reform. First, it emerged from the fall of the Soviet Union. There was a complete economic disarray. There was a huge lack of skilled people, especially people who spoke Estonian at the time. And there was very little money, and there were many public services that simply had to be done. And in that context, and supported by Finland and Sweden, Estonia was able to build it from scratch, driven out of necessity. And as we all know, it's this move towards digitalization that laid the foundation for what made Estonia thrive later. And I think this is something that really could happen in Ukraine. And it's not only important for governance, it's actually important because there are many systemic issues in innovation governance and innovation overall that needs some kind of someone showing the way forward. This is how we can rethink it. This is how it can be done. There will be resources there, and there will be need there to drive it. But this is one of the areas where Ukraine can not only do very well, but also maybe become in some areas some of the leaders in the world, because this can be an opportunity. And I think that is a framing that I think also we in our work in supporting innovation, especially when the time finally comes for Ukraine to be able to focus on its recovery, that's the kind of angle that we think are very important, and where we and also ETIN would love to help and support in any way we can. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion. But it was important to me to frame and to link it that way, because we do want to have a second regional project where Ukraine will have a major role, and we need your engagement, your suggestions, your support. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anders. So it's my great pleasure now to introduce our two panelists. They both come from the Global Government Technology Center in Kyiv. This was established by the World Economic Forum together with the Ukraine's Ministry of Digital Transformation. And I think you may be our youngest panelists yet, so I feel both inspired but also a little bit obsolete. So we have Kateryna Frolova. She's the head of the Innovation Gateway, so she leads the development of Ukraine's GovTech Labs and innovation piloting program. And Ms. Iuliia Drobysh, she's a project manager that works with Kateryna directly to implement the GovTech Lab and also to enable the export of Ukrainian GovTech solutions abroad. So both, so I would say the Global Government Technology Center in Kyiv is a relatively new partner to us. I think your center was established about a year ago, but there's also some familiarity, as Anders mentioned, Iuliia, with a great pleasure of working with Iuliia at UNECE for a year between 2021 and 2022. Good. So maybe we go straight into the questions. My dear panelists, how would you define open innovation? How do you see it in the context of your work? And how can the Ukrainian GovTech and innovation ecosystem make the most of it?
First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity to be here. We're extremely delighted to be sharing our journey today and to be surrounded by people who are interested in what Ukraine has managed to achieve and what the plans are. Thank you so much for that. And now to the question about open innovation. We see it as a collaborative approach to innovation where organizations in a broad sense go beyond their internal capabilities and engage with external partners, such as typically like startups, research institutions, private companies, and citizens to co-create new solutions, technologies, services. And the aim is to focus on R&D and not just rely solely on the in-house R&D, but also open it up to stakeholders who might be more knowledgeable or more equipped to address the challenges that come. And when it comes to Ukraine, the concept of open innovation has become extremely relevant for the public sector. As you probably know, and as it has been mentioned already, we've done a tremendous journey when it comes to progressing in digital transformation, e-governance, building out the robust digital public infrastructure, and actually showcasing the resilience in the face of all the challenges that are related to the full-scale invasion as well. So yeah, the main push of digital transformation has started from 2019 and is continuing. But the concept of open innovation is fairly new. And we're planning to actually popularize it and open it up to all the stakeholders who are involved in innovation. If we talk about like the transformation of the digital infrastructure, we have a very clear governance structure. Basically, we have a vice prime minister who is responsible for digital transformation, and in each of the ministries, so national level, but also regional level and local level, we have chief digital transformation officers, which empower the network and which represent the network and empower the creation of digital solutions. And starting from this year, chief digital transformation officers are also responsible for innovation. So in terms of how Ukraine can harness open innovation, there can be various formats like GovTech Labs and challenges, and that's something that we're going to talk about more extensively today, like open APIs and data, where our government can publish even more open data and usable data sets to allow external innovators to come in and propose solutions and build solutions based on the robust data framework, crowdsourcing platforms where it can actually involve citizens and potentially a vast diaspora in feedback and ideation on new services and solutions, academic policy collaboration, and obviously what we're here for, cross-border innovation pilots, because the role of GGTC is, and specifically our department, Innovation Gateway, is in bringing innovation in GovTech from the world into Ukraine and vice versa, actually showing the world what Ukraine has achieved and sharing our knowledge and best practices and being a proactive actor in the world ecosystem of GovTech. So I'm going to park it here, but yeah, again, thank you so much for having us today.
Thank you, Kateryna. Iuliia, you just come in whenever you feel like it, or should I give you the floor separately? How would you like to proceed?
I can just add very briefly.
Let me ask, would you like to add anything to what Kateryna said?
Yes, I think it's okay if we proceed one by one and then we sometimes add to each other. But I first of all wanted to thank you so much for the very warm welcome to everyone here joining us to hear more about Ukraine's GovTech and our project. A big thank you to Anders, Jakob, and Manuela, all my former colleagues at the UN, really, really grateful for all the learnings and all the great times we had, although we never actually met each other. It was all online because of COVID. Just want to thank you so much. And on open innovation, so as Kate said, that's basically an opportunity to open up innovation to everyone involved, startups, individuals in some cases, in some countries, which we'll talk about in this session as well, and how just individuals can step into open innovation and strengthen governments and help them solve public challenges. I think here also really important to note that governments are always overstretched, so their resources are limited. They have complex challenges. Government structures are not always best designed to respond to these challenges. And I think what we're most inspired by the concept of open innovation is that we unite all these stakeholders together and create this enabling environment for them to basically participate in open innovation. It's just to note, really important. I know as AI is emerging and other concepts which will completely shake up, the government structure and how we solve things, open innovation remains really important because it opens up this access to innovation to everyone. And we're happy to talk more about how we want to make it work in our GovTech Lab.
Great. Yeah, I'd love to go into some of the more specific initiatives, the GovTech Lab and also the Open Innovation Challenge. I just want to pick up on one thing that came out from your both of your answers. So in a way, Ukraine is in a unique position because it's both a digital pioneer, but also a country that is rebuilding in a crisis. I'd be interested to hear more about how you can adapt open innovation models to harness not only local talent, but also global partnerships for public sector solutions.
Actually, this is the approach that we are looking at leveraging as being part of the centers of the Fourth Industrial Revolution Network from World Economic Forum. We're very well connected with the centers in different countries, and we partner very closely with the center in Berlin, which is the first center in the world that has been established to focus on GovTech, and we're the second one. So in order to actually attract innovation from the international GovTech scene, we're going to partner first of all with the WEF network, but then also expand outside. And we're, again, like us being here today basically proves that we're really aiming to be connected to the international scene. And when we talk about the structure of our open innovation program, we'll talk about the ways we're planning to leverage international startups to come in and solve some challenges that Ukrainian government might have in GovTech.
So yeah, Jakob, you mentioned a really important thing, which is basically how we came to adopting GovTech Lab in our context, actually. So as Kate mentioned, Innovation Gateway is the name of our team, but we focus on innovation piloting. And as you may imagine, Gateway is letting in some, innovation models, so to say, from abroad, the tried and tested ones, and adapting them here, but also exporting our GovTech solutions and knowledge abroad as well. And here, I think how we came to adapt this model that you mentioned, I mean, first of all, we're in the war, right? So many processes now are streamlined. Innovation is happening very quickly. I mean, for instance, in defense, now things are being done much cheaper, quicker, faster than they could be before. And similarly in open innovation, I mean, everyone sees the edge that there's so many GovTech challenges that need to be solved very quickly, given that it's the war. Because the more GovTech challenges we have solved, the more efficient the public sector is, and the more efficient citizens are as well. And we save money as a result of it as well. So definitely, especially while so many projects in Ukraine and digital transformation are primarily donor funded, including ourselves, we're funded by the Swiss government. We're part of the East Europe Foundation. There's some other amazing initiatives like the CDTO campus that we can talk about as well, which basically prepares these chief digital transformation officers to step into the government and help digitize different ministries, right? That's just to kind of come back to the point that war is definitely very difficult and tricky, but it's a great opportunity, as we know historically, to advance, things such as this open innovation model that maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago wouldn't really have the buy-in, because people would have maybe more questions about why should I do it, as opposed to this urgency of solving issues right now. So maybe could that be maybe of interest to maybe dive into more about why exactly we went for this open innovation model, GovTech Lab, maybe in the context of this conversation that we've already touched upon, this you know, the best practices from abroad and how we adopt it here in Ukraine locally.
Yeah, so this was going to be my next couple of questions. One, you know, what is the concept behind the GovTech Lab in Ukraine, and why did you specifically decide to go for this project? And what are some of the key ambitions? What are the targets that you've set, and maybe also how will you measure your success on this initiative going forward?
So perhaps I could start, and then Kate, you could maybe like elaborate. So maybe it should be the other way around, because Kate was the first person who came to this team, and you know, as the center was very quickly created, so we exist for 6 months, right? And the name was Innovation Gateway. So what do you do in such a team? Obviously, Kate and I come from the private sector and also public sector, but we both wanted to be very efficient. So when she started to lead the team, her ambition was, how can we design the most effective enabling environment to pilot innovative solutions, and how to make that quickly, efficiently, and with the educational aspect and sustainable impact long term. So speaking of the GovTech Lab, as many of you may know, we did not reinvent the wheel. This is something that has been of a practice in many other countries. We can, you know, elaborate on this more going down the line, but for instance, Scottish examples, CivTech, that were founded in 2016 and have been widely successful in basically creating this environment where governments share their GovTech challenges. You know, at the start it was that way. Now it's a bit different. Sorry, just to actually the model has kind of updated. So right now what CivTech is focusing on is basically listing public challenges, right, that the government entities articulated, and then startups basically coming up with their solutions to solve these public challenges. And then what CivTech is creating is this, you know, enabling environment and matchmaking between the government and startups, where they can explore each other's ideas, needs, and, you know, work hand in hand to solve what unites them, basically the interest in, you know, solving a problem that benefits the public. And, you know, when Kate and then also myself, we did some research, we just thought that this model was most effective. This GovTech model was piloted in a number of countries. Lithuania as well is a very famous one in Europe. And for us, we knew that this open innovation challenge, you know, it was not a thing in Ukraine. It did not exist yet. So there were some hackathons, but they were maybe a bit more short term. Maybe they had a bit less funding. Maybe they were less sustainable. We were interested in creating a case where we engaged both sides, but not just to solve a problem and to forget about it, but for the government entities to become closer to startups. So basically for them to be less risk averse, more trusting to the private sector, for the private sector to work more with the government, not be afraid of maybe some bureaucratic complex things, right? Even when, you know, some private sector, like some companies can be turned off by procurement and other practices, for instance, right? So in that sense, to kind of make them more friendly to each other, but also going forward, the KPI was to basically create the environment where they come to a solution. So for instance, the government entity articulates very well their challenge, and the startup comes up and says, okay, we'll help you solve it. Let's work on it hand in hand. And throughout this process, to basically come down to a pilot solution that would then be, you know, scaled. So a pilot solution that solves a problem, helps the government, also creates an opportunity for a startup, so a GovTech opportunity, and also has an ambition to scale in the future. That's probably, Kate, would you like to maybe come in and comment on that?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much, Iuliia. So Iuliia has already touched upon the fundamentals of the program design, but I'm going to elaborate a bit more on the ambition and the core functions. So the vision was to create an engine for open, agile, and inclusive public sector GovTech innovation in Ukraine. And the core functions would be the following. First one is GovTech challenges, where government issues specific public problems, and the focus here is specifically on the problem, not on the envisioned solution, not on the concrete, like specific technical requirements for a specific system, but actually a problem at its core. The second function would be a sandbox environment, where the program would provide the regulatory technical support for testing new tech in real-world public service setting. So kind of give that ground for experimentation in a risk-free environment. Then innovation matchmaking would be the third core function of the program, where on the one hand, we connect civil servants with their pains and startups with their potential solutions. And Iuliia has already elaborated on that. The fourth core function would be capacity building. As I mentioned in the beginning, chief digital transformation officers in Ukraine on all levels are now tasked with the job to actually develop innovations in their respective industries. So we are aiming to give them an instrument and the platform to do that, and actually to learn more about the approach of open innovation, about what design thinking is, agile product development approaches, and actually how to work with private sector, because oftentimes we see that the vendor in the private sector and challenge sponsor or challenge nominator in the public sector, they speak different languages. It's not always very straightforward and easy for them to find common ground for the most effective and user-centric solution. So that's the problem we want to solve with an educational program, with an acceleration program. When we go through the stages of GovTech Labs, like implementation stages, we'll cover that too. And the last one, we don't just want to create pilots, we also want to think about scale pathways and support successful pilots to be adopted at scale through procurement, policy, and institutionalization. So that part is going to be the most challenging one, because running an open innovation challenge program with just selecting pilots is one thing, but actually allowing those pilots to find application in public sectors in a sustainable manner, it's much more difficult. And here the procurement and legal frameworks would be crucial to work on.
Right, very true. Just to follow up, so maybe you can elaborate a little bit on the issues that you faced when developing and proposing solutions within the private sector. We all know that within the public sector, within ministries, we all know that that's a difficult task. What are some examples of resistance that you faced, and how have you overcome them?
Resistance from the public sector in designing the solutions for challenges.
And taking on some of the solutions that have been elaborated and proposed.
From my exposure to the public sector, which lasted for 1.5 years, in the child protection system, I've observed that, and this is a common ground rule, that the government still approaches product development in a waterfall approach. And usually the relationship between the government sector that is trying to solve a certain problem, like build a system, create even a website, like a simpler problem, that the government approaches it in a pure waterfall approach, even at the start not having the full visibility and understanding of all the details that are needed to build an effective digital process. And when it comes to the re-engineering of business processes to reflect the digital transformation best practices, the legislation changes are needed. So it's kind of contradictory, because the government is trying to build a system in a waterfall approach, so everything needs to be very clear as of the start of the process initiation, but is still not able to fully re-engineer the legislation in time to actually match that transformation. So that's one of the big key challenges. And then when we approach the development in a waterfall manner, then it's a very long, bulky, heavy process. And again, the level of clarity is not always sufficient to match that process. So that's one of the big ones. In terms of the relationship itself between the vendor and the government entity, it's not always, from what I've observed, like partnership-like. Sometimes it's more like you're the vendor, you have to deliver, etc. And this is the historical approach, and that's fine. But we still see value in developing more of a partnership and relationship building approach here for achieving the most efficient result when it comes to the product itself. Yeah, so those are a few to name.
Great. Tell us a bit more about how you structured the Open Innovation Challenge and what were some of the expected outcomes.
Iuliia, do you want to start, and I can pick it up if you want?
Yeah, sure. So basically how we're structuring it as a timeline, and we're very ambitious. The first step is basically to open up a call for government entities to submit their GovTech challenges. So this will be an online form where any government entity representative can sign in and write down the details, basically submit their proposal in terms of what GovTech challenge they're facing at the moment. Then followed by it, we'll open up a call for startups applying to solve these challenges. But in between, of course, so we'll have, and that's actually something we're still developing at the moment, because as we speak, we developed the methodology for GovTech Lab as well in parallel. So of course, there'll be a selection of GovTech challenges in place. So, the challenges that will participate in GovTech Lab. After we will publish these challenges online, and then open up a call for startups to basically propose their solutions. All of this will be happening online, and for the kind of open call among startups, we'll use the World Economic Forum platform called Uplink, so that any company can just see and suggest their solution. After it, we'll run a phase where government entities select the startups that match best their needs and the proposal. And then afterwards, we want to engage both sides in the exploration stage. So where the government entity is partnering up with up to 3 startups. So we ideally want to run 3 tracks. At the moment, we want to have a demand driven. So we do not want to define the themes for each GovTech challenge track yet. We want to first, gather the interest from the government entity. So look at the GovTech challenges that they submit. And then, after we pick these challenges, open them up to the public and, then, match them with startups. So just in brief, there'll be 3 GovTech challenges and up to 3 startups at the beginning, working with each government entity. After it, there'll be the exploration stage, as we've mentioned. So this is more of a discussion between the government entity and 3 startups on their needs, on how the startup can best tackle the solution. So the very initial stage. And then, as we'll pick, so once the government picks one startup they will work with, there'll be the accelerator program, where essentially, startups will, learn more about not only the government needs, but also the government's way of thinking, kind of work more to tailor the solution they're proposing, and also for the government to give this feedback loop. Throughout the program, we'll have the educational element that we have mentioned. So for governments, so kind of upskilling them on product design, product thinking, et cetera, et cetera. And then the next stage would be the MVPs. So startups will present their MVPs to government entities. And then the very last step will be the demo day, where startups present their solutions to the government entity. So in that respect, our ambition is, a really good pilot solution per GovTech challenge, which has, the potential to be scaled nationally. So that's more or less the structure of the process.
Excellent. Kateryna, you didn't want to come in? No, good.
Yeah, Iuliia has covered quite well, so we can move on to the next.
Great. So when you set up the center, when you designed your initiatives, I'm sure you looked at open innovation models in other countries. And today we have representatives from OECD countries, from South Caucasus, from Central Asia, from Southeast Europe. What are some examples of open innovation models in other countries? You mentioned Scotland earlier, but I'm sure you looked at many others. And importantly, how will the Ukrainian model differ from models in some of the other countries that you have observed?
I can take that briefly. So as Iuliia mentioned, CivTech is a very prominent example. We connected with them in early days, and Iuliia hasn't visited them in Scotland, but she can talk more to that experience. Lithuanian GovTech Lab is a prominent example, and what is interesting is that the Scottish model and the Lithuanian models differ significantly. The Scottish model is more oriented towards value for money approach, where they leverage pre-commercial procurement and then actually provide very robust funding to challenge supporters and those who then find the solutions. And it's a 15-week accelerator, so there is an educational component and co-creation process. And yeah, as I mentioned, the funding is quite considerable. Usually, CivTech allocates around 600K to 1.3 million pounds per project. So it's quite a significant impact that can be achieved with the funding. And then there is an exploration stage of 3 weeks to discuss with institutions what kind of solution they're looking for. The Lithuanian model is more focused on community building, on experimentation, on engagement between the startups and public sector. So the pressing on the results is not the focus. So the focus is on experimentation itself. We've also engaged with the MIL Lab in Colombia. It's an innovation lab by Government of Colombia, Entrepreneurship and Innovation Agency. Their focus is on digital transformation acceleration of the public sector. So basically bolstering GovTech, but kind of building it out thanks to this program. Again, the program fosters synergy and collaboration among the 4 types of stakeholders. Local authorities, academia, universities are quite prominent in the mix, and then businesses and also citizens. And another one, which is not national level, but like more local level, is Greater London Authority. We've engaged with the team who runs Challenges for London. It's an open innovation program to solve complexity challenges to positively impact the life of Londoners. Both Iuliia and I used to live in London, so we were quite happy to engage with that team and see that they're solving some meaningful challenges. And they focus on consolidating London's ecosystem and the delivery model of like scaling innovation. And it's also about the test and learn approach to reform the public sector. The models that we've just talked about, they shape the vision, and the methodology is quite in line with what the partners are developing. But in Ukraine, due to our peculiar circumstances related to the sense of urgency, related to the full-scale invasion, we're trying to design it slightly differently. First of all, Ukraine already has a very strong digital brand, thanks to the Ministry of Digital Transformation, and very strong like ecosystem of GovTech products like DIA, Prozoro, and a lot of others that you probably heard of. So what we're not trying to build out our GovTech from sort of scratch. We're more emphasizing on the mechanism of public-private partnership and like more effective experimentation and innovation and capacity building, as opposed to actually like focusing on the development of the DPI, I would say. So the lab will focus less on building internal platforms, but more on actually that mechanism of public-private partnership to then see if we can pilot any legislation changes that are needed in the procurement frameworks and intellectual property, etc. So that's the differentiation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Could I?
Yes,
Sorry,
Iuliia, please come in.
could I add to Kate's words? And Warren, thanks so much. There's a comment on the UK Catalyst. So I actually studied the model as well. But thanks so much for flagging it. I just wanted to also elaborate a bit more on this difference between the Scottish and the Lithuanian models and how ours is a bit of a hybrid. So obviously, and I wanted to thank so much for the partners who just opened up, you know, when we contacted them and just said, we want to create a similar model here in Ukraine. They were really transparent, you know, from procurement to their internal practices, very useful materials, and we encourage anyone who's interested in exploring similar GovTech Lab models to contact both of them. They're very open and friendly and helpful. From CivTech, the very interesting thing is they are driven by public challenges, but on the other hand, so whilst they do focus on this value for money approach, which basically means after the solution is ready, you know, it is ready to commercialize. So on the one hand, they're solving the public challenge in very interesting ways. I was present at an event where, you know, startups presented their MVPs, really interesting ideas, and very grateful for, you know, the inspiration that we can bring to Ukraine in that respect. But, you know, there's also focus on, you know, the CivTech program basically telling their startups that, yes, while you may enter a contract with a government at the end of this program, so the so-called pre-commercial agreement, on the other hand, you need to think about your own project. This may be one contract with the government that you enter, but then, be wary not to change your product entirely just to the government's needs, because, you're still a startup. You need to, commercialize further, which is a really interesting angle. Of course, thanks to the considerable funding, there's both so pros and cons. On the one hand, it's very powerful funding and gives really good opportunities. And the larger chunk of funding is unlocking at the end of the program, so after the exploration stage. On the other hand, as this is Scottish government program, and we know that still governments may be risk averse. There's a lot of accountability, for every penny invested in these projects, because this is innovation, right? And there's also a bit of a tricky part that comes with it. In Lithuania's case, what's interesting is that they're just focusing on experimenting, and they're not very keen on, maybe the most effective outcomes in terms of the value for money. But what matters for them is just engaging the two parts of the governments and startups together, which is really interesting. And I feel like, to sum up, like Ukraine's case, we'd love to have the value for money approach, because overall, if I can tell, having worked in different settings, especially previously in the UK, in Ukraine, people are a bit more pragmatic. And, here there's a big urge to just get things done for yesterday, as we say it. So our program is going to be very ambitious and setting very high KPIs where, we know the government entities have very high standards already. So startups will definitely be working, very quickly on these pilots. On the other hand, we want to incorporate the Lithuanian model, right? Because this open innovation model did not exist before. So experimentation and making sure the two sides talk. So in sum, really interesting to learn from partners. We would be really curious to maybe, if we all gathered in 1 year, look back at the model, how we implemented it, what worked, what didn't. But for now, we're super excited about what's to come, and to be informed by all these approaches.
Thanks so much, Iuliia and Kateryna, for these insightful answers. I'll ask one more question, a brief one, and then I'll open the floor for participants to come in and ask questions or make comments. So if you had to choose one type of support for government institution that they need most to implement open innovation, what would it be? Just very short answer. If you had to choose one type of support that, from your experience, is most essential, maybe you can each give your answer, and then I'll open the floor.
Mine is going to be very expected. I would say funding to be able to implement their ambitions in the innovation sector, and then capacity and mindset change when it comes to working with innovations, like if I'm absolutely super short.
Thank you.
I mean, it's not going to be very innovative what I say, but exactly what Kate said is actually what we need. We speak to many government entities that have amazing ideas and implementation in place, but they don't get funding for it. And in terms of the support that Kate also mentioned, in terms of procurement and many other things, we absolutely need, the best practices, but also, the bottom-up desire to make them happen. So yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for this. Good. I see a question from Warren Smith. Please, Warren, come in.
Thank you very much. Great presentation. Really enjoyed hearing of your experiences, and I think the point you just made around the opportunity for the different centres to come together to share lessons learned, I think is a really important and interesting one around how do you stimulate innovation in practice based on the different approaches, because as you say, there are different approaches between, say, Scotland and Lithuania, and understanding that contextual differences require there to be adaptability to the local context. But I think that would be a really interesting kind of almost community of practitioners involved in innovation, GovTech innovation. But that's not my question. That was just a reflection. I think, do you see, and it was mentioned, I think, once or twice around DPIs, digital public infrastructure and digital public goods. Do you see centres like yourselves in Lithuania and Scotland and elsewhere to potentially be catalysts in themselves to support both the consumption of existing digital public goods and infrastructure from other contexts, as well as feeding the growing ecosystem of DPGs and DPIs, so that you get this kind of increasing network effect of innovation, feeding innovation and consuming from what's being done out in other jurisdictions? But yeah, can you hear your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you so much, Warren, for your question. From what I understand of the question, the labs similar to this one become catalysts of innovation. And what I would say is some labs don't just focus on GovTech innovation, but also go beyond that. So for instance, we're exploring only digital tools, whereas some labs also work with like potentially hardware and more complex project implementations. And then I would say that digital public infrastructure is actually what powers and helps and becomes this foundation to develop that open innovation approach, because essentially it's about having the digital identity tools, digital payments and exchange platforms, data exchange platforms, and like open data. And that's what we mentioned as well in the beginning, like building products based on the data-driven approach and having that availability of data is also crucial. So I would say that DPI actually is the foundational element, and it powers the labs like the ones we've talked about, but also noting that not all of them focus solely on GovTech. Some of them go beyond that and sometimes work with not just software, but also hardware. If I understood your question correctly.
I just wanted to elaborate. I mean, Kate answered your question, but in terms of our centre, we're focusing also on GovTech export. So we want to create opportunities for our GovTech solutions to be incorporated elsewhere. And, we have the GovTech board, which is basically the pragmatic forum that was established in Davos this year between Mikhailo Fedorov from the Ministry of Digital Transformation Ukraine and the Chief Information Officer, Marcus Richter. And it's basically a forum where top decision makers in digital transformation, collaborate over shared, issues, and exactly what you mentioned, like try to catalyze innovation also across. And this is going to be a really exciting space. So we as a centre always promote such initiatives. I mean, GovTech Lab is just one of the many things we do, but we also focus more broadly on, promoting this collaboration and making sure that we both channel it to Ukraine and from Ukraine. In this respect, we hope to also be able to tell you more in the coming years, since we've existed for 6 months, but we understand there's a lot of demand both externally and internally for the GovTech Centre like ours. Last thing I want to mention is that there's going to be a World Bank study on Ukraine's digital transformation coming out this year. Our centre is proud to coordinate the interviews for the World Bank together with the Ministry of Digital Transformation. And there on the DPI, you'll find a lot of really cool insights about how Ukraine started on this digital transformation journey and how we got to where it is now. So it's more like a 360 view on what Ukraine did, why it got to where it is at the moment. We'll talk about digital resilience as well in the times of war. So if this is of interest as well, and if you, for instance, have also, Warren, any ideas on how we can help in terms of our centre, so channeling some, GovTech solutions to where you are, and, to everyone on this call, we'll be really grateful for any of your, suggestions. Please contact us. We're very open and want to only, promote and support the cause.
Thanks, Warren. Thanks, Kateryna and Iuliia. There's a question in the chat from Len, who is in a shared space, so he can't express the question verbally. His question is: I'm curious as to what extent Ukraine's open innovation approach may provide a point of access to bad actors into Ukrainian government systems, and how you guard against this.
Thank you so much for the question. Actually, extremely relevant, especially given that the concept of open innovation is basically opening up and making it more accessible, like government systems on their own. So the challenge here is to balance out the transparency on the one hand, and then collaboration to make sure that the system have cyber resilience and national security in mind as well. Of course, in the program design, we'll have robust selection process with key industry stakeholders in the digital transformation involved to help us evaluate against like any potential risks, and there will be due diligence conducted to make sure that the startups who participate can bring in only relevant expertise and there is no significant risk. But of course, the open innovation in it has a paradox of like kind of driving speed of adoption and innovation on the one hand, but of course, creating even more exposure points. So that's something we'll definitely have to keep in mind. And the key risks that we need to foresee is thinking about API vulnerabilities, because like we have a Trombita, which is the system that connects a lot of government registers in the backend and make sure the data flows is consistent. So we'll need to make sure that there is no violation, and if not properly authenticated, the data cannot be like exploited for scraping, for injection attacks. So yeah, we do really need to think about things like that, but also to know that most of Ukraine, like biggest GovTech solution, national level solutions are built using zero trust architecture and multi-factor authentication. So basically they're secure by design, and given that Ukraine has had to endure a lot in terms of the increased threat, yeah, we've had those risks in mind as well. So yeah, thank you so much for flagging that.
Yeah, just to echo, of course, there'll be some risk mitigation measures in place. But as yesterday we had just to kind of add GovTech meetup at our center, and one of the participants was Iuliia, who's a former deputy minister, now advisor to the Ministry of Digital Transformation. And, you know, she is advocating, which we agree with, for working on open innovation. As much as there are risks, you know, the benefits outweigh. And it's about, you know, capitalizing on the benefits that innovation brings and then mitigating these risks. And we're very, you know, grateful to our partners as well, who, you know, already have some risk mitigation measures in place, and also what Kate has mentioned. So the Ministry of Digital Transformation is, you know, remains our key partner, who's also going to inform us. We also have the, you know, GovTech community here, startups in Ukraine. So we're also, you know, like this is actually one of the key questions I hear when I sometimes brag about Ukraine's GovTech abroad, you know, showing them, oh, I have a passport in my phone, or like, oh, you know, if I wanted to, I could marry online, or like I could pay my fines online. And they're like, but what about cyber? You know, I remember one person said, oh, we in France, you know, he said like there are some people who are afraid to use a credit card because they don't want their digital footprint. Well, for us in Ukraine, I think it's more of a case that we have used these government technologies for several years and we really like them. We see the benefits outweighing the risks. And even if there are cyber attacks and we're still all vulnerable to these risks, the benefits prevail. And you will see that Ukrainians abroad, they're like very often brag about the DIA app. But, you know, this wouldn't have come into place if people who were developing the DIA app focused on the benefits and did not focus, you know, did not predominantly focus on the risks, you know, so the risks did not stop them. There are mitigation risk measures in place. But, you know, here are the benefits, which are very tangible. So to your point, really crucial, but we are capitalizing on the gains while having really good systems in place.
Thank you both. And thank you, Len, for the question. It's 10 to 5, at least in Geneva. So we have about 10 minutes left. So I think it's high time for the game segment. And I'll pass over to Emanuela, who will be the master of ceremony, so to speak, of a little traditional game segment.
Thanks a lot, Jakob, and thank you very much to Kateryna and Iuliia for this great discussion and the insights provided. So those of you who know the Innovation Circle series also know that we like to finish on a more personal level. We like to get to know our speakers more beyond their professional roles and responsibilities. So for that, I would actually ask you, Jakob, to share already the first slide. The game is called 2 Lies and 1 Truth. So we'll show 3 statements about each of our speakers. And then we will invite you, the audience, to please indicate which of these statements you think is true. And yeah, and then we will revert back to our speakers for for the response, and hopefully a nice anecdote fitting to the true statement. So if we start off, we have here Kateryna's first statements. So I'll read them out and then I'll launch the poll. The first statement is, I have changed 6 countries over the past years. I have once pitched a public sector innovation idea in a sauna. And the third is, I once turned down a job at NASA because they didn't let me run their innovation program. So I'll already let you think about it, and you will see the poll launched in a few moments, and then I'll kindly ask everyone to say what they think. All 3 of them seem definitely very, very interesting. And here we go. You should see it now. Okay, it seems that statement 1 is winning. I'll give it a few more seconds for further responses. Okay, I think we'll close it here. So it seems that statement 1 is believed to be the truth. Kateryna, over to you for the true statement.
Sure, I guess it was kind of obvious because it's the one that is most realistic and the one that makes most sense, because the 2 other options are quite absurd. So I'm glad that you think them reasonable and didn't pitch a public sector innovation idea in a sauna. Thank you so much for that. But yeah, overall, I changed 6 countries in the past 8 years. I lived in the US, the UK, France, and Ireland. I worked in big tech originally, and then when the full-scale invasion started, I decided to move to Ukraine and work in public sector reform for childcare in Ukraine as a chief digital transformation officer. And then only since January of this year, I've transitioned to the role of head of innovation piloting at Global Government Technology Center in Kyiv, and I'm delighted to be here. So yeah, to close it up from my end, I would really love to connect with everyone who was here with us on the call and this podcast and continue conversations and see if we can have additional synergies with you. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you so much, Kateryna, and great to hear that you've lived in so many places. Do you perhaps have a favorite place, somewhere where you enjoyed most, or?
Yeah, I think it's the UK. I lived in London for 2.5 years, and this is the place that gives me most joy and where I feel most at home after Ukraine, of course.
I can understand that. Well, great. Thank you so much for those statements and for your response. So over to Iuliia. I can see that Iuliia's statements are already on the screen, so I'll quickly read them out. The first one is, my cat was a champion of Europe. The second one is, once accidentally you CC'd a minister on a meme thread and got promoted for it. And the third is, my Scottish chef, for whom I've worked part-time for 3 years, always pronounced my name in Ukrainian correctly. So I'll launch the poll, and please, participants, vote for what you think is the truth about Iuliia. It seems statement 2 is taking the lead for now. I'll give it a few more seconds. Please vote. Okay, well, yeah, I think statement 2 has won. Accidentally CC'd a minister in a meme thread and got promoted for it. Iuliia, please let us know.
That's perhaps like people reflecting on my UNECE experience, right? So promoting from intern to consultant, because that could as well happen, right? I mean, that's hilarious. Actually, that is not the case, but I love how people did like the option. The truth is, my cat is a champion of Europe, and that is no joke, because my cat is a British Shorthair breed, and we brought him to different cat shows, just to share him with the public. There was no professional interest or competition whatsoever. It's just that the cat was really nice and cute and beautiful. We just wanted the whole world to enjoy him as well. And then so it happened that we all also were given some places and you know, some ribbons. On cat shows have like first, second place ribbons. And I do have a picture where there's like an array of ribbons. And then I remember I made a post about it being the fact that my cat has more achievements and more in his portfolio than I do, which was the truth. So because he had so many ribbons, it qualified him to become then a champion of Europe. So he is technically a champion of Europe because of this number of awards. So it's just to reflect, that's the truth.
Iuliia, that's amazing. And if you have a picture of your cat handy, you should share it now or share it later with the group. Ideally with when it's holding its trophy.
Yeah, I mean, if you give me like 2 seconds, I mean, it's going to be patchy. I'll show it from Instagram, but that's the picture. Whenever anyone looks at him, they say, "Oh my God, his face is bigger than yours," quote unquote. I hope. Oh wait, sorry. I'll just close the background if I can. But if you can see a bit. His face.
That's amazing.
Sorry.
We did get a glimpse. Amazing. Well done.
Sorry.
Well done to the cat. What's his name?
Barca. So in his passport, he was Boss, but we named him a bit more informally Barca. But he always had some royal, you know, habits. Like, yeah, he's the boss.
Great. Excellent. Well done. Good. So that leads me to close today's podcast seminar. I'd like to thank our two wonderful and inspiring panelists. I think it fills us all with optimism about the future of Ukraine. I'd like to thank everyone who participated, and we look forward to welcoming you at our next podcast episode very soon. Thank you and have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.